And Monica, our event is December 8th now, is what correct.
Sorry, correct. I didn't realize I was muted.
No
And we're
worries.
live.
Okay. Yeah, I see everybody coming on in. Good. Well, we'll go ahead and get started because we've got two really great speakers. We've got some announcements from advocacy, as well as really just I wanted to take a moment just to thank everyone, to thank our members, to thank our sponsors this year. You all may not realize this, but our FPA chapter actually grew in membership this year. And that is unheard of right now in professional membership organizations like ours. So we are just extremely proud of this group to be able to do that in a year where we could not meet in person. And as much as we wanted to, we actually did strive to have this meeting, but just to be safe, you know, here we are virtually again. But with that said, and as a token of our appreciation, really wanted to let you, actually this group, be the first to know that we are having a member appreciation event. We just got the contract locked and loaded for the, excuse me, the Ponce City Market rooftop on Wednesday, December 8th. It's going to be from 5 to 8 p.m. And it's exactly what it says, member appreciation, no cost to members. It's just gonna be a time where we can get together, actually network. And I would love to be able just to meet all of the great people and members and guests that we got to connect with at our symposium this year in May. Oh yes, Luis, yes, it is a great location. We're really looking forward to it. So we're gonna have appetizers, drinks, maybe a few activities. You know me, I like to get people together. So it's going to be a really fun time. So you'll see more about that. I have an ask of everyone in this room. If you are not already following us on LinkedIn, please connect and follow us, because that's going to be the first place that we post updates for the event. We'll have a marketing promo that's going to come out shortly, but then as we have more things planned, that's going to also come out through LinkedIn. So please make sure that you're following us there. Okay, so before I introduce our first sponsor, Caden Home Care, I did want to go ahead and take a moment to let you know our advocacy chair, Latoya Maddox, is going to be speaking to us and giving us an update, an advocacy minute in our meeting. And I'm excited to hear what she has to say. She's been doing a ton of work representing not just FPA, our chapter, but advocacy in general for the financial planning profession. So really excited to hear what she's going to say for us. Before we introduce our first, actually, I'll go ahead and introduce Cozy, if that's okay, Cozy, so then we can kind of segue on, because then Latoya is going to then segue to you. But Cozy Whitman, as you all have seen, she's going to be our first speaker after we hear a moment from our sponsors. She's our education and partnership leader at College Inside Track. She speaks nationally about college search, educating families and training financial advisors and other professionals who work with families with high schoolers. College search has become increasingly complex, the nuances hard to understand. Cozy is passionate about dispelling myths that cost families money. She was featured in the Journal of Financial Planning on the subject of college planning. She's excited to connect with organizations and families interested in learning more about the complex college search process. She's a mom of 5 kids with very different goals for college, so she is no stranger to the challenges around college search. And so if you're like me, you have many clients who are embarking on this process, and it is as part of the financial planning process as anything. So we value people like Cozy and any education information she can give us today regarding the FAFSA changes. So we're looking forward to hearing from you, Cozy. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Yeah, you're welcome, and thank you for inviting me. Absolutely.
Okay, without further ado, I wanted to take a moment to thank our sponsor, Caden Home Care. They are a sponsor for this event, And again, financial planning involves
Hello, everyone. I'm Greg McGuire with Caden Home Care. We're proud to be along.
Sorry, Kristen.
Is it going? There we go. I think, yeah, just hit play again. I think it just paused.
Adults and clients stay.
There we go.
Hello, everyone. I'm Greg McGuire with Caden Home Care. We're proud to be a long-term sponsor of your quarterly meetings and look forward to doing these back in person when the time is right. Well, I've used an expression to use your terminology here, and that is Caden is in the wealth preservation business. Caden is the oldest and most established home care company serving all of Metro Atlanta, all 16 counties, and we're celebrating our 37th year in business. We are the first phase, helping your older adults and clients stay in their homes thriving for as long as possible, pushing out the dreaded decision to sell or move into an assisted living or independent living environment, which is something they really don't want to do. It's stressful, and it may come at considerable costs. Assisted living and independent living facilities here in Atlanta, they're beautiful and they do a wonderful job, but they're very expensive. They're anywhere between $5,000 and $10,000 a month. And making that decision prematurely can result in $200,000, $300,000, or $400,000 in unnecessary expenses. All of us are marching into retirement, and we all are declining physically and or mentally. And that's where we come in. With our flexible schedules starting Tuesdays, Thursdays, and then kind of moving to Monday, Wednesday, Fridays, or perhaps the weekends, we can help with all the things that we take for granted. We address ADLs, activities of daily living, bathing, grooming and dressing, ambulation, getting out of bed and toileting, meal preparation and light housekeeping. We also do medication reminders and food shopping and transportation. So you become your life coach for these clients, and they trust you. So please offer Caden and trust us to help your clients. Our phone number is 770-396-8997, and we're available 24/7. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Greg. And then lastly, we have our sponsor, Thrive.
Hello, everyone. I'm Greg McGuire with Caden Home Care. We're proud to be a long-term sponsor.
No offense, Greg. Thriven is a silver partner this year, and just like our members, actually, I would say more so our members, but they actually help us to reach our financial goals so that we can make things happen for you guys. So including this event on December 8th. So with that said, I'd like to introduce LaToya, our advocacy chair. Thanks, LaToya.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you. I am your advocacy director, and we've had a fabulous virtual national advocacy day, which was like the first time this has ever happened. So I'm going to give a brief update on that. It was September the 29th. So for everyone or anyone who participated, I want to thank you. It was a joint effort by the Financial Planning Coalition, which consists of the CFP board, the Financial Planning Association, of course, and then NAPFA. And I was able to attend the meetings for a representative from Senator Ossoff and Senator Warnock, and then Representative Rick Allen. Some of the top issues that were discussed, obviously, is the fiduciary standard. That's number one on everybody's list. Another one was an act that is going to be securing retirement for all Americans. The third issue that we discussed was restoring and expanding the tax deduction for investment and financial planning. So that's a bill that's actually active right now. And then the last issue was the support of the 529 plans. There's a provision that they want to have the 529s be permitted to fund and maintain professional designations and not just higher education. There are a lot of financial bills happening right now. I'm going to put in the chat a PDF that lists all of the bills that are going on right now. And we are keeping a pulse on what's happening, and we will report back as we get more information. And as always, we're always looking for help. So I am looking for a committee, at least 2 to 3 people, to help track these bills and bring information back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, LaToya.
Well, good morning. And by the way, what a great advocacy around that 529 plan. What a good idea. I think people sometimes forget you can actually use it for you. It doesn't have to be used for your kids. Well, good morning. My name's Cozy Whitman. I am with College Inside Track. And if you are unfamiliar, we have been helping families navigate college search for the better part of 15 years. We help students identify which schools fit them best, and we break that into 3 key categories: academic fit for them as a student, the right social fit for them as a student, and the right financial fit for the family. So as we're working with the family, we're assuring that the schools that are making it to the list at the end of the day will come in on budget, right? Whatever their budget is. And if you know people who are in the midst of college search, you know this can be a very stressful time frame. And so consequently, one of our roles as we work with families is to assure that we bring down the stress levels by giving the family a roadmap. You know, we drive the bus, we help them figure out what's your next step and how should you expend your energy. Today, we're going to talk about some significant FAFSA changes that took place in the pandemic relief bill in December of 2020. So that bill was 5,000 pages. The FAFSA changes were 157 pages of it. So I think it's fair to say that many legislators did not know what was in that bill beyond the pandemic relief stuff. And so today, let's talk about I'm going to review what FAFSA does for families, what its purpose is, how assets and income on the FAFSA impact the output of the FAFSA, and then we're going to talk about the changes. These are the most significant changes that have been made to the FAFSA in more than 20 years. And so finally, we will talk about how can you leverage these changes to actually benefit your own client base and maybe even grow your book of business. So why are we talking about this now? Well, the first FAFSA that will be impacted will be next fall. The income that gets reported on next fall's FAFSA is taking place right now. You're earning it. So let's talk about how this is going to roll out. Initially, all the changes were going to take place next year in the fall of 2022. However, the formula changes to the FAFSA are so significant that states and colleges pushed back on the Department of Education and said, whoa, we cannot make those changes in 1 year because often software is going to need to get changed. And so they are now going to roll out these FAFSA changes in a phased approach. So a few changes will take place next fall in 2022. This will impact 2023-2024 financial packages, but here's the good news. Most of those changes next year actually are not formulaic in nature. They are things like verbiage on the FAFSA is changing. The output of the FAFSA is changing from expected family contribution down to something called student aid index. A student will no longer need to register with selective service as part of next year's FAFSA. Today, if you can't submit your FAFSA until you've officially registered. So that requirement is going away. That'll be one of the phased in changes in fall of 2022. The most impactful changes, however, will take place in the fall of 2023 for the 2024-2025 school year. Those kids, so when you think about high schoolers today, the families who have current high schoolers where it will be their first FAFSA currently have sophomores. They're not rising anymore. I did this presentation a whole bunch this summer. They're actually in their sophomore year. So the current sophomores will graduate in the spring of 2024. And so this will be the first group, but here's the thing that people need to know. There's no grandfathering here. So people who have current juniors, seniors, or freshmen in college who are still in college when these changes take place will find themselves also filling out the new form. So there's no grandfathering, and you'll see why that's important here in a few slides. So, and by the way, happy to take your questions. Feel free to drop them. I don't know if you guys traditionally use the Q&A or the chat, but feel free to drop the questions in, and I can certainly stop and take questions. They're kind of natural breaking points here, and happy to take them. So let's talk about the FAFSA. Today, the FAFSA is traditionally is filled out in the fall of the student's senior year. You might remember back to your day, you filled it out in January or February of your senior year. Today, it gets filled out in the fall, and most schools want it kind of aligned with the student's application. The FAFSA does get filled out yearly, so this is a form that needs to be filled out each subsequent fall then. The last one the family will fill out would be in the fall of their student's junior year of college. It is always predicting the following school year's financial aid package. So if you fill it out in the fall of 2024, it will be for the 2025-2026 school year, and so on. It determines need at 2 levels. This is probably the biggest misperception that families have, and advisors have, by the way, about the FAFSA. Need is not just determined at the federal government level. So you fill out your FAFSA, you hit submit, you get back a report from the federal government that says you don't qualify for any need-based aid. And I say that because the vast majority of you will not work with anybody who qualifies for need-based aid at the federal level. The income level is quite low at the federal level to be able to get yourself into need-based aid. And so consequently, lots of families get back a report that says they don't qualify, and they assume that means everywhere. Because I can't tell you how many families I sit with individually where they hand waft me, right, and say, we're not going to get any need-based aid or financial aid. They are often using the terminology financial aid incorrectly. And it's true, you're not qualifying it at the federal level, but it says nothing about what the colleges will actually do with it. It may be a factor in the addition of merit money, interestingly, to their package, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So while it does not determine merit-based aid at a college, it can be a contributing factor. And then it is literally the application for the federal student loan. So the verbiage FAFSA, those letters actually stand for the free application for federal student aid. And again, the federal government is using terminology aid to mean 2 things. One, need-based aid at their level, but also determination for the federal loan. Here's the good news. Every single student qualifies for the federal loan program. You just have to fill out your FAFSA. It's the application. And then it creates a great deal of confusion and stress. If you've worked with families during their FAFSA season, they've called you up and asked for information on their investments. You know this can be very confusing. It can be very, very stressful for people. And part of the reason it's stressful is because back in the day, we all knew somebody who got need-based aid. Lots of people got need-based aid. Today, that's not true, but people don't know that. They don't know that the formula has actually shifted over time. And so consequently, they spend a lot of time and energy unsuccessfully to try and make themselves need-based. And we'll talk about that here in a little bit. So how is the FAFSA used by colleges? Well, the FAFSA is actually used by each individual college to determine need. And families could find themselves need-based at one school and not need-based at another school. So people might not find themselves need-based at Georgia, but at Embry-Riddle, totally need-based. And why is that? Because the formula for need starts with the sticker price of the school. So this is the manufacturing retail suggested retail price, if you will. The sticker price of the school minus the output of the FAFSA called the expected family contribution. Today, again, that verbiage is going to change next year on the new form to student aid index. So sticker price minus output of the FAFSA equals demonstrated need. And so because it's a math formula, people of course assume that if they just move things around, they can make themselves need-based. But let's talk about why that almost never works. I want to lay out for you how income and assets are assessed on the FAFSA. So who contributes to the FAFSA formula? Well, parents have to put their information in the formula. For parents, their assets are assessed at 5.64%. It is the lowest assessment on the FAFSA. The thought is, of course, that the federal government would like people to be saving for college, and they don't want to penalize them, despite people's belief structure. They don't want to penalize them for saving on the FAFSA. And so assets on the FAFSA are assessed at 5.64%. Parent income, on the other hand, assessed up to 47%. It's age determined. And so it's important for parents to know that their income is the single biggest influencer on the FAFSA. Students are also included on the FAFSA, of course. It's their form, technically. And so their assets are assessed at a 20% rate, where their income assessed at 50%, but good news, most students don't have much income, so it doesn't have a very big impact. Grandparents, on the other hand, are not assessed at all. So grandparent information does not go on the FAFSA. It does sometimes creep into the formula today, and we're going to talk about that in a few slides. A couple of things you should know: 529 plans do not get put on the FAFSA under the student area. 529 plans are a parent asset for the purposes of FAFSA, so assessed at that low rate. However, if a student would have an UGMA or UTMA, regardless of the age of majority in your state, it is actually assessed on the student side of the house. So those savings vehicles actually are assessed at a much higher rate. And so as you're helping your families think through this, if they have UGMA or UTMAs, and the purpose of that is to actually was savings for college, and they are planning to use it for college, they should spend that down first, get it off the books, then go ahead and tap other savings vehicles they might have in place. A couple big points here, things that do not make it onto the FAFSA. A family's retirement accounts should not go on the FAFSA. No qualified retirement account should go on the FAFSA. And then the other big asset that most people have that doesn't go on the FAFSA, the value of their home. So a primary residence also does not belong on the FAFSA. All right, before I jump into significant areas of change, I want to see if we have any questions. And I don't know if, I don't know, Kristen, do you want to peek and see if people have submitted questions at all?
Yeah, let me check here. I don't see anything in the official Q&A, but a lot of times we just post directly in the chat. Yeah, I don't see anything. Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and I had a question. I know the CSRS kind of comes up a lot, I think, for private schools, maybe. Is that, you know, I know that's, we're talking about FAFSA today, but is that something that college, that your group does counsel on as well with regard to aid? And okay.
Yes. Yeah. So when we work with families, we help them with all of their financial aid forms. So some schools use a CSS profile. Some schools use their own profiles. Okay. And anything that the schools ask for sure, we help them with.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
You bet. So let's talk about some of these areas of significant change coming down the pike. The big formula changes are taking place in these areas. The number of kids that families have in college will be significantly impacted. Grandparents positively impacted. Divorced families have kind of a shift in the formula. And so for some families, it will be impactful. For other families, it will not impact them at all. And then there is a built-in formula change. This is not an output of the bill that was passed, but I want to help you understand why it is harder for people to pay for college today. And one of the factors is that the formula for the FAFSA continues to evolve and change in a negative way. And so we'll cover that today as well. So the number one change that will impact clients that you are working with is that the number of students in college, the question that asks a family, how many kids do you have in college, is going away on the new FAFSA form. So the new FAFSA form is going from 108 questions today down to 30 or 36. And one of the questions that gets ditched is, how many students do you have in college today? Well, why does that matter? Here's why it matters. Today, if a family has multiple kids in college, the output of the FAFSA, that expected family contribution, actually gets split across both students. And so I want to demonstrate how this works, and then I'm going to take you through an actual scenario so you can see the impact this change is going to have on your clients. So today, if a family just has one student headed off to college, the expected family contribution, they fill out their form, and let's say it comes back. I'm just picking this number at random. Let's say this family comes back, they get their student aid report back, and it says your expected family contribution is $60,000. When they have two kids who go off to college, that $60,000 gets split in two, $30,000 to student A, who is now in their sophomore year, and $30,000 to student B, who might be a freshman. And, this could take place if the kid's a senior and a freshman, right? It doesn't really matter. But as long as they have two kids in college at the same time, that EFC gets split and each student gets half of it. In the new formula, the student aid index works like this. With that missing question, student one, they fill out the FAFSA, get the aid report back. It says, hey, you've got a $60,000 expected family contribution. That, of course, is the same on the old formula and the new formula. With student one, only one kid in college. But when student two comes along and they fill out two FAFSAs, that student aid index is not going to be split amongst those two students. And so student one will have a $60,000 expected family contribution, and student two will have a $60,000 expected family contribution. So maybe you're scratching your head and going, who cares? I don't know why this matters. Let's talk about how this matters. I want to play this out in an actual scenario that is actually relatively common. So a family has Joe. Joe's going off to college. And Joe chose a college where the sticker price of the school is about $55,000. The student, the family fills out the form. Don't let students do it by themselves. They will make errors. Adults make errors. 40% of families, by the way, make a mistake on their FAFSA that ends up costing them money. So definitely students should do it. So 55 minus an expected family contribution of $60,000 means that Joe has no demonstrated need at his college. And so in year one, Joe gets $0 of need. And just as an FYI, to give you some sense, an expected family contribution of $60,000 would be the equivalent of a family who makes about $235,000 as a household income and has two kids in college, or excuse me, two kids in their household. So in year two, Joe is now going to be a sophomore, right? The family fills out their FAFSA in the fall. And in the current formula, Joe's new expected family contribution is $30,000 because the family has Jane, who is also going to school. They're filling this form out for the first time in the fall of her senior year. And they indicate that next year we will have two kids in college. And so you can see in Joe's scenario, he's still at that same $55,000 school, but now he has an expected family contribution because it's been shared with Jane of $30,000. And in year two, he is going to get $25,000 of demonstrated need. And that's going to hold true, right, as long as those two are in college. So for Joe, that's going to last through the remainder of his time frame, assuming Jane's going to be in school for 4 years. Jane also, she chose a cheaper school. She's headed off to Georgia, baby. We're going to call it $35,000. I don't think Georgia's quite that high, but let's call $35,000. She has an expected family contribution of 30,000, it leaves her $5,000 of demonstrated need. And in a lot of states of the country, there is a sliding scale for need for kids who are headed off to public institutions. And so they'll get some portion of that $5,000 met by state grants. So this family in year 2 has $30,000 of demonstrated need. So let's look at year 2, because year 1 doesn't change, right? Family fills out the FAFSA, Joe goes off to school, same scenario as that top formula. In year 2, however, let's take a look at how this changes. So Joe is getting ready to be a sophomore, right? His family fills out his FAFSA in the fall of his freshman year. He's at the $55,000 school, but the student aid index does not split. And so consequently, in year 2, he will also have $0 of demonstrated need, and that will hold true for the remainder of his time in college. Jane is off to her $35,000 school. She also has a student aid index of $60,000, and so she will not get need at her college either. And so this family in 1 year will lose $30,000 of potential need-based aid, and not once. These guys are going to lose that money for every year that Joe and Jane are in college together. This is significant. There's no question. What it says to us is, hey, your lawmakers have no idea how the FAFSA actually gets used in play, right? They're thinking about the federal use of it. They are not thinking about how this might impact families. And here's the deal. The families that are going to be most impacted by this change are your middle and upper middle income class families. Because for people who had lower incomes, they were always going to qualify for need-based aid. And for people who were going to cash flow college, they were never going to qualify for need-based aid. So the people that it impacts classically are the people sitting right in the middle. This is going to be big. There are a lot of people who have kids in college when this transition takes place who will be getting need-based aid potentially because they have 2 kids in college that will just poof, disappear. Now, lots of people say to me, hey, don't you think they'll change that before the bill actually implements? I'm not hopeful about that. I don't know if you guys are paying attention, but Congress does not appear to get much done. So I'm not hopeful the bill itself will get changed. What I am hopeful of is the colleges will figure out how to make this work. Because here's the deal, they can't really afford to have people dropping out of school now because they can't afford the college. All right, we are going to talk about grandparent impact on the FAFSA, but before we do that, I want to see if you have any questions. So we have one question. Luis wants to know, how do you find out what your student aid index is? Is the school supposed to tell you what it is? Do you get a letter in the mail after you've completed the FAFSA? A good question. Yeah, when you fill out your FAFSA, it's electronic today. So you hit submit, and then your student gets an email back, because technically the FAFSA is the student's. The student gets an email back that says, here's your student aid report. Lots of people miss it because they're checking for their own emails, not their student's email. And then in that report will be the expected family contribution or student aid index. It will say it right in there. And you can run your own formula, right? As you look at schools for your student, you can take their sticker price, subtract your student aid index, and that'll help you understand whether or not you qualify for need-based aid at their school. Let's see. Oh, good, Kristen. Good that you dropped that in there. Any other questions? All right. I'm going to move ahead. And if I miss yours, maybe Kristen, you can help me out. Thank you. Let's talk about how grandparent contributions to college impact the FAFSA. today, so this is the current world that we live in. When grandparents send money off to college on behalf of their student, the student must report that on the following year's FAFSA. So if grandma and grandpa help students pay for it would be, because you're filling the FAFSA out in the fall, it would be the previous year. If grandparents help a student pay for the previous year, the student has to report that on their FAFSA. The FAFSA currently counts that as untaxed income to the student. And untaxed income to the student gets assessed at a 50% rate. And so consequently, sometimes when grandma and grandpa try to help, that money negatively impacts the student's need-based aid. And so kids do find that they lose need-based aid in the half of the amount that grandma and grandpa sent off to college. And it's challenging, right? Because a lot of grandparents are helping because maybe the parents can't. And so I think it's impactful and a head scratcher, if you will. So in the current scenario, if a student's getting access to need, grandma and grandpa sending money off to college on their behalf has negative impact. It's counted as income and can decrease the student's potential need-based aid. On the new FAFSA, it will have no impact. This is probably the single positive place that they made changes in the FAFSA. So this has real world implications. When you start to think about the families that you work with, this is an opportunity for you, right? To do some multi-generational advising, because grandma and grandpa are going to be a much better place to save money. And by the way, it doesn't have to be grandparents. It could be a godparent. It could be an auntie or an uncle. But I talk to a lot of families every single year. And a lot of families have a grandparent or someone else who's important to the student helping them pay for college. And so this is such a great opportunity for you as an advisor, maybe the single largest, most impactful change for the advisor industry since the 529 plan. It's a great opportunity to bring in family members, have a good multi-generational conversation around where to save money for college today. Because remember, the parent 529 plans are counted on the FAFSA. And so now, unremarkably, right, they're accounted for at 5.64%. So if you have clients who don't have grandparents, for instance, involved, or maybe there's not good family relations there, it's okay, right? Move on. But for the ones that you do, and maybe you work with the grandparents and you've never talked to their kids, or maybe you work with the kids, but you've never talked to the grandparents, it's a good opportunity to bring people in and have that conversation. Okay, let's take questions. Laura wants to know, is everyone required to fill out the FAFSA even if they won't qualify and you don't want a federal loan? So that's a more complex question, interestingly, than you might think it is. What I will say is the short answer is no, it's not required. So if a family doesn't want to take advantage of the low interest rates on that federal loan, and they know for a fact they're not going to get need-based aid, they might call the college and ask them if they will have some impact to their merit aid package because they don't fill it out. I'm going to talk about this in a couple slides, but I'll just share it now. The FAFSA actually can add money to a merit package, so the scholarship dollars the student gets for other things, because the schools are so interested in that information. So there are a lot of schools around the country who actually add money to a student's scholarship package just because the family filled out the form. The output of the form doesn't matter to the impact on the merit package. The colleges are just interested in the data. They're just interested in the information. And so it is recommended that people fill out the FAFSA. Here's the other thing that happens at a lot of schools is if a family doesn't fill out the FAFSA, the college kind of holds the FAFSA, or excuse me, their merit package hostage, right? So they dangle it. They're like, hey, here's your merit package. you know what, we noticed we haven't gotten your FAFSA yet. As soon as you send that in, this merit package, all yours. So just be aware that that exists as well. All right, so let's talk about how divorce is going to impact change. I want to take current day, and then we will talk about the change. So today, the way the FAFSA determines which parent fills it out, and yes, only one parent is going to fill this out, is based on where the student lives. And the rule of thumb for the FAFSA is wherever the student spends 51% of their time, that is the family who fills out the FAFSA. I want to be really, really, really clear about this. There is so much misperception about divorce and who fills out the FAFSA. So many people think it's tied to who claims that student on their tax return. It is not. Share that with every family you have who is divorced. Those two forms are not tied together. So you could be the parent who fills out the FAFSA and not be the parent who claims that student on your taxes. There is no relation between dependency on the tax form and who fills out the FAFSA. So please cut that tie for all of your families. If a family splits their custody 50-50, in essence, they can choose which side fills out the FAFSA, and I would choose the family with the lower household income. So again, not tied to taxes. If it's a 50-50 split, they can choose. In the new formula, it is shifting from where does the student live to who financially supports the student more. And so the rule is whoever supplies 51% of support of the student, so financial support of the student, must fill out the FAFSA, and they actually close down the loophole of you get to choose. And so the new rule is written straight into the FAFSA. If you have a family where both mom and dad split equally the cost of raising their kids, they must choose the household with the higher household income. We have not yet seen definition around what does support mean exactly. There are a couple of things that I just want to point out. They've shifted how things count in the formula in some areas. The first is the family must be legally separated or divorced. So the parents have to actually have gone through the court system to fit into the definition of only one parent fills it out. So if the family has not done that, regardless, I talked to a family the other day where the parents are separated, but they've never gone through the process of legally separating or divorced, and they just live in separate households. They actually will need to include both of their household incomes on the FAFSA under the new formula. And there are states around the country that don't have a thing that is legal separation. Some states don't have that. And so consequently, those families will still need to include both parents. Alimony today actually counts as income to the family who is receiving it. And so that is actually shifting. It's going to shift from being counted as income to being counted as an asset. And so shifting from being assessed at 47% down to 5.64%. Any questions about the divorce scenario?
And I don't know that it was, with the divorce scenario, but Joe brought up a point about it sounds like the family member paying directly to the college may be better than contributing to the 529. And then I think there was a conversation with Stephen where he responded that grandparents paying tuition directly to the school is considered untaxed income to the student, or only untaxed income if they give to student and then the student uses it to pay. So
yeah, it's a good question. So in the first scenario about family members just paying directly to the school, here's one thing to keep in mind, right? People who have money in a 529 plan have been earning interest on that investment, and they get to use that money tax-free, right? So don't take people out of saving because of the shift around grandparents, right? Or because it's perceived as being penalized. Any investment, and you guys might not, as advisors, you guys have these long games, right? I'm talking strictly for this little square window, right, of college time frame. But saving for college, no question, reduces the debt that families have at the end of the scenario when the student graduates. So don't pull people out of saving for college, right? The family money, whether it's getting pulled from a savings account or whether it's getting pulled from a 529 plan, is going to be assessed at the same rate, right? So if mom and dad are paying money out of their checking account directly to the school, one, that money isn't really earning any interest, by the way. And two, it was in essence gets kind of double counted because it was counted in the income and it gets counted sitting in their checking account or a savings account sitting in their bank as an asset now. So at least when it's in an investment vehicle, it's earning interest during that time frame. So I wouldn't do too much gyrating. Again, all of this gyrating around need amounts almost to nothing when it comes to the impact on the FAFSA, because remember, assets only are impacted at a 5.64%. Their income is the single largest factor on the FAFSA. To answer Stephen's question, the question on the FAFSA actually says, where else did money come from to help you pay for college and how much? So we always recommend people be honest on the FAFSA. It is audited at a much higher rate than people's tax returns. And so there is that question sitting out there the way that it's posed today. And so it doesn't matter if the grandparents pay directly to the school, if it came out of a retirement account, if they send it to the student and then the student just pays for school. Technically, it has to be reported. Here's the good news, though. That question is disappearing in the fall of 2023, which means grandma and grandpa can start spending money on their grandchildren as early as next year, right? Because there's not going to be a question that asks about last year. So for all intents purposes, grandparents can basically start sending money off on behalf of their students to college starting in the fall of next year.
Wow, thank you.
Sure, absolutely. Good conversation, by the way, around incentivizing colleges to reduce their costs. Happy to kind of address that. There's no reason for them to reduce costs, right? Our current system today does not incentivize colleges to change their pricing at all. And certainly happy to jump into that conversation if you guys want to a little bit later. I mentioned earlier that there is a formula change coming to the FAFSA, or excuse me, a formula change that's been embedded in the FAFSA for multiple years in a row. And this is one of the primary reasons that it is more challenging for families to save for school. Beyond the fact, because you guys are 100% right, our flagship universities have increased their tuition rates by quadruple percentages, many of them. I live in the state of Minnesota. University of Minnesota has increased their tuition by 570% in the last 30 years. University of Michigan, 1,053%. UConn, 1,300%. Those are just the ones I know off the top of my head. I should have looked up Georgia. I'm sorry that I didn't. I don't always talk about that here. But because you guys were talking pricing, I want to get that out there. The big state flagship universities, when you run the numbers, are well over 400% increases in the last 30 years. So that's one of the factors that makes it harder for families to pay. Another is the formula of the FAFSA has also shifted. And so 10 years ago, a family could actually set aside $5,200 in non-qualified retirement assets. And after that, then they started counting assets. Well, when you think about your clients, where do most of their assets sit? Most of them sit in retirement or their home. So the little bit that they had sitting outside of that, for instance, in checking and savings accounts, wasn't getting counted before. And so today that number is down to $6,600 2 years ago, it was 11.9. So in 2 years, that number will disappear. And families will have to include all non-qualified assets, and of course, not their home. So that's one of the big changes. All the things they changed in this bill, and they did not fix that part of the formula. So here's the deal. I already hear your wheels running because you guys are strategic thinkers. Over focusing on need blinds people to the best ways to actually reduce the cost of college. So you guys asked about high net worth families. I gave you my answer. We still do recommend that people fill that FAFSA out because it can have positive impacts on the scholarship side of the house, on the merit scholarship side of the house. Looking for ways to reduce your assets almost never works. I talked to a family who makes an income of $30,000. They're working overseas at an NGO. They have like $300,000 sitting in a savings account, and they wanted to try and understand how that was going to impact their students and should they do something about that soon. And I ran the numbers, and it actually only changed their expected family contribution by a couple $1,000s. Their income was still the single largest factor, right? And did qualify them for need-based aid. So all this gyrating that people want to do, you would be so much better serving your clients going, whoa, 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 whoa. We're not going to shift assets around. We're not going to move things here, there, or the other way, right? We're actually going to focus on other things. Because guess what? As your advisor, one of the things I know is that your assets are only assessed at 5.64%. And no, you don't have to include your retirement account. So you're good. I want to walk you through the comparison of need-based aid versus merit-based aid. Because when we work with families, we run a FAFSA forecaster as one of the very first things we do. Because if they're not going to be need-based, they're not. Let's just push it aside. And we are not advisors, by the way. We don't give any recommendations about what to do with money. When people want to know that stuff, we turn them back to you. We don't do stuff with that. But most people can't wiggle their way into need. And so instead, we have them shift strategies. And the strategy shift is, let's go find schools that are just better gifters then, right? Let's find the schools who can help you meet your budget goals for college. So I want to do a comparison between these two so that you understand the functionality. Need-based aid is determined solely on the outcome of the FAFSA or other financial profiles like the CSS profile. Merit-based aid, on the other hand, is based on all things amazing and wonderful about the students. But this is where people have to put their business hats on. As parents, they tend to think like, my kid's awesome. They're going to get a ton of money. The students get money because it helps the colleges with things they care about. Colleges make business decisions when they accept students, and they make a business decision when they give away money. And so schools give away money because a student helps them with their metrics of success, right? How do we measure success as a college? This student checks this box, this one, this one, this one, and this one. Here's a package for you. Need-based aid comes to the student in the form of a grant or scholarship, and so does merit-based aid. There are freshman grants out there that are sometimes one-shot deals. It's a little bit like a signing bonus, if you will. And then the bulk of merit aid is actually in the form of scholarships. The colleges, by the way, are the #1 place to find scholarship dollars. They give away millions every year. Last year, our senior class of the group we worked with garnered more than $14 million from the schools that they had applied to. It comes through how you do your search. And I have a whole presentation on that if you guys want to have me back sometime. Need-based aid gets reevaluated every single year, where merit-based aid does typically last all 4 years. So when they get the scholarship, the Amby Smith Scholarship and the Bulldog Scholarship and the Presidential Scholarship, those classically last all 4 years. Most schools cover some level of need, but here's the mistake that a lot of people make. They assume that if they have need, the school will cover 100%. There are actually only a handful of schools in the country that do that. Not all schools give merit-based aid, however, and it varies greatly school to school. So here's the deal. If I'm Harvard, Columbia, Stanford, NYU, Duke, Rice, University of Chicago, the highly selective schools in this country do not give merit scholarships. So anybody you know who got a scholarship from Harvard did not get it because they were smart. Every kid who goes to Harvard is smart. They got it because they were need-based, because Harvard does not do merit. Why? Think about it as a business. If I have kids bashing down the door to get in, there's no incentive for me to give away money. If you don't want to pay my full fare, I've got 147,000 other kids who do, right? There's no reason for them to discount their prices. And so it's really important for people to understand that lots of schools in this country don't bring scholarship dollars to the table. I can't tell you how many families I meet where they have those selective schools on the list, and part of their strategy for paying for school is my kid is smart enough to get scholarships. Those two do not go together. So I want to give you a peek at how colleges give away money. This is a very common recipe card for colleges around the country. The thing that I want to point out here, because we're talking about financial profiles today, is this school gives $1,800 just for filling out the FAFSA. This school is a CSS profile school. They are giving $2,500 for that CSS profile. This is not something schools share with families. And so you are potentially missing out, not on $4,300. You're missing out on whatever 4,300 times 4 is, right? $17,000 if you don't fill out your forms at this school. That is why we recommend people fill out the forms. You might notice some other really interesting things here. Like I said, I have an entire presentation on need and merit aid and how families can reduce the cost of college. All right, so a quick quiz for you. Curious, what is the most expensive education in the country, I wonder? I have a tip for you. This is not a school name. It is actually the education that never gets finished. Started, but never finished. And so consequently, let's see, what percentage of students do you think transfer at least one time in their time frame? Is it 6% of kids, 14% of kids, 25% of kids, 38%, or 50%? I'll give you a second to grab your number. The national transfer rate today sits at 38%. Why does this matter? Because the cost to transferring has skyrocketed. The average cost to change schools just once increases the cost of the student's degree by $14,000. $14,000. And guess what? 45% of that 38 make a poor choice a second time. They transfer again. That increases their cost by $24,000. So finding right fit schools the first time, so important today in the collegiate search. Here are some keys to adding value to your clients. One of the challenges financial advisors have in this space is that they think about this when families come to them. And I have news. When families come to you, it is already too late to change the cost of college. So often families show up when it's time to save for college, and then they show up again when it's time to spend it, right? So they come sometime end of senior year when it's time to start to tap those numbers. To reduce cost of college, maximize scholarship packages, or even make yourself the most viable candidate you can be for those selective schools, people have to start early. And we partner with advisors because this is such a great opportunity for you to add value in an area that families don't traditionally think about your help. Grandparents, of course, always looking for ways to help. It gives you access potentially to another generation. So start to think about how you might do some combined generational work. And I mentioned, and super apologize for sending random chat in the middle of the beginning in Kristen's introduction. Did not mean to hit send on that. But I do partner with advisors all over the country, and you are welcome to take advantage of our free consultation, we sit down for an hour and chat college with families all over the country. And so my goal when I sit down for that hour is to get their questions answered. And I don't just talk financials, right? We talk about ACT prep. Should you invest or no? Should your student take AP classes, or would they be better doing some dual credit in some other format? How do you do a great college tour? And you're welcome to leverage that with your own clients if you like. So I'm going to put into the chat a link that will give you access to reach out to me if you want, fill out the Google form. We do a monthly newsletter. It's very succinct, by the way, for advisors, because you guys don't have time to read some long honking newsletter. It is information you can literally plagiarize at will. So if you send out your own newsletter, you certainly can do that. Go ahead, Kristen, sorry.
Oh, no, I was just chuckling when you said plagiarism. I thought that was funny. No, I mean, and also I just want to point out, Luis had a really quick question about, why does transferring cost increase the cost of school?
Yeah, this is such a good question. It is a combination of factors, but the single largest factor in that number is that when you transfer, you have lost your value, business value, to your second school. So schools count for your graduation rates. And as a transfer student, they can't count you. And so the big merit packages go to freshmen. So when we work with families, that's why we don't just work on the financial side of the house. We actually work on academic fit, social fit, and financial fit. That national transfer rate sits at 38%. When we work with families, it drops to under 4%. Because kids have evaluated the school at a deeper level. And that is the biggest factor in that $14,000.
Gotcha. Well, excellent. Well, thank you so much, Cozy, for your time this morning and the education you brought us. This is really, really helpful. And just thank you. We'll definitely be seeing you again, hopefully at the FPA of Georgia. And okay, so without further ado, we are going to take a very short, and I'm talking 2-minute break, everyone, just for any coffee refill anyone needs to have, and then I'll be excited to welcome our next speaker and actually our interviewer, quote, or moderator, Wayne Ewing. So let's just take 2 minutes, and then we'll come right back, everyone. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Greg McGuire with
All right. Well, we are back, and I didn't even say this, but happy Friday, everyone. And I'm going to make a really other quick plug again for our upcoming member appreciation event. It's going to be at the Roof on Ponce City Market on Wednesday, December 8th from 5 to 8 p.m. So make sure to mark your calendars. And without further ado, I want to introduce Wayne Ewan. He's our current education chair. He and our co-chair, James Lofton, are responsible for the individuals you are in the presence of this morning, including our next guest. And so Wayne is also our president-elect, meaning he's our president next year. So I'm really excited to announce that. Thank you, Wayne, and thank you.
Thank you, Kristen. I appreciate it. And thank you, everyone, for attending and joining us today on a Friday. So first, what I'm going to do is say a few words about Invesco, our partners that are joining us today. And then I'm going to introduce our guest speaker, Marty Flanagan. So if you bear with me for a moment, I'm going to read this because I want to make sure I state this correctly. Invesco is a global independent investment management firm headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, with roughly 1.6 trillion assets under management. They are dedicated to delivering an investment experience that helps people get more out of life. With offices in more than 20 countries, their distinctive investment teams deliver a comprehensive range of active, passive, and alternative investment capabilities. From a field sales perspective, Todd Page, Jim Totten, and Aaron Picone cover the Southeast region and look forward to partnering with all of our members in the fourth quarter and into 2022. So I have, as I said, the distinct pleasure and honor of serving as moderator, and I have an opportunity to have this conversation with Marty Flanagan. Before I kick us off in terms of that discussion and your questions, I'm gonna read Marty's bio, which is extensive, so bear with me as my eyes dart to the side while I read this. Marty is president and CEO of Invesco. Marty Flanagan, excuse me, is president and CEO of Invesco, a position he has held since August 2005. He is also a member of the Invesco Limited Board of Directors and serves as trustee and vice chair of the Invesco Funds, the company's U.S. open and closed-end funds. Mr. Flanagan joined Invesco from Franklin Resources Incorporated, where he was president and co-chief executive officer from 2004 through 2005. Previously, he's held numerous positions of increasing responsibility at Franklin, co-president, co-chief operating officer, chief financial officer, and senior vice president from 1993 through 2003. Mr. Flanagan served as director, executive vice president, and chief operating officer of Templeton, Galbraith, and Hansberger Limited before its acquisition by Franklin in 1992. Before joining Templeton in 1983, he worked for Arthur Andersen & Co. Mr. Flanagan serves as trustee of Southern Methodist University and as a member of the executive board at the SMU Cox School of Business. He serves as chair of Engage Ventures, an innovative platform bringing together Atlanta-based corporations to support startups. He sits on the executive council for the Metro Atlanta Chamber and served as 2020 MAC chair. He's a member of the executive committee for the Investment Company Institute and formerly served as chair and on the board of governors for ICI. He serves as a board member of the Atlanta Committee for Progress and is a former ACP chair. Mr. Flanagan is also a CFA charter holder and a certified public accountant. He's earned a BA and a BBA from SMU. I also had the pleasure, I believe it was sometime during 2019, of attending a CFA of Atlanta event where Marty was a guest speaker with Marge Franklin. It was a fantastic opportunity to hear his thoughts and insight. I'm hoping today that we could replicate that in some regard. So with that being said, welcome Marty Flanagan from Invesco.
Wayne, great to be here. I'm sorry about the bio. We'll get the Reader's Digest version next time. I apologize, but great to be here. What a great group doing important things. So thank you.
Not a problem, not a problem. It's a pleasure to have you. And I obviously have an opportunity to delve in and get some of your thoughts. with regard to the industry. So what I've done is I've sort of bucketed where I'd like to take the conversation into areas of themes. One area is sort of your thoughts on the investment management industry. Another area obviously is markets and the economy. And last would be some of your thoughts with regard to diversity. So that being said, I think, this is obviously a good opportunity to dive in. One of the places I'd like to start is passive and active investing. It's a topic that's obviously been discussed and sort of had this push and pull, maybe even viewing it as maybe a little bit of a battle between the two. I'd love your thoughts with regard to your thoughts around passive and active. Obviously, Invesco has both passive and active managers within your firm. Insights on how you see the industry moving forward with regard to that.
Yeah, great question. And for a good long time, as you can imagine, this conversation between active versus passive, and most people set it up that way, and I agree with you. And we don't look at that at all. We look at it, the answer is just active and passive, and frankly, alternatives if you can get those allocations into your portfolio. And we look at it as the best way to build a portfolio for your clients, right? Understanding all that you do, right? Understanding their objectives, time horizons, et cetera, returns, risk, and a combination thereof, we think gets the best returns. So if you then go on, sort of follow through to the point of the industry, I think part of why it might be active versus passive, if you don't have the totality of the capabilities within the organization, you might be setting up the conversation, more consistent with how your firm is set up. My view right now is, investment management industry continues to be a very good industry, continues to grow, but is going through a once in a generational change, something that I've never seen in my career. I think we've all predicted it for decades, but it's actually here now. And really what's happening is, people like you, Wayne, are expecting more out of money managers. You want more from them, beyond investment capabilities, things like thought leadership, things like Invesco consulting to help practice management and the like. And so it's putting a lot of pressure on money managers where you really have to have the resources to make a difference for our clients. And that's really what you're seeing going on right now.
Thank you. No, that's very helpful and very informative. The other question I had, and it's come up quite a bit in conversations with clients, are just around how the industry has changed in terms of the number of publicly traded companies. Mm-hmm. So fewer and fewer public traded companies are available. Private equity is become a more integral part where it probably wasn't as much, maybe in the 1990s or even beyond. How I'd love your thoughts there. How does that shape your view with regard to active and passive, or maybe the investment options that clients should be considering?
Yeah, look, I think it's you're exactly right, and it's there are fewer public companies, and you've actually seen sort of the alternative world, PE, grow quite dramatically. From our perspective, there continues to be that role for a combination of passive, active, and when we say active, we include alternatives within that. And sort of by definition, it was a very difficult decade for active managers, right? I mean, it was central bank intervention. There wasn't beta-driven markets, so it was challenging for a number of active money managers. The fundamental fact, though, having active in your portfolios is the only way that you can generate alpha for excess returns. By definition, right? Cap-weighted indexes, that's what you get. And by the way, we have the totality of it, right? So it's really the reality of the situation. And I think the next element that is, if you can get alternatives in the portfolios for your clients, that's a very good thing, right? It then becomes the issue of, focus on the liquidity, that you can afford to have within the portfolio. And again, that's just another element there. But so we are, again, just very strong proponents of using the whole risk return spectrum to build the right portfolios to create those outcomes.
That's helpful. Very, very helpful. The other thing is, I know I've had a number of conversations, and I want to say even in our investment symposium, the theme of consolidation, which is industry-wide. It's not just obviously in the RIA space, it's just across the board. Interest rates being historically low, obviously a great time for companies to look for opportunities to merge, consolidate, make changes to their overall businesses. With that being such a theme, any lessons or insights that you have? Obviously, you have an extensive career. You've seen a lot. You've been through a lot. Any insights or lessons that you can share from the Oppenheimer acquisition and maybe other acquisitions that Invesco's made?
Sure. And it'll probably resonate as you think of your practices too, right? So when we think about where we are as an organization, what drives us forward, where do we spend our time, where do we spend our dollars, it's really driven by the client backwards. What is the client looking for? Are we meeting our clients' needs? We try to do it, organically first, internally, right? Get the resources there, get the people against it. But if there's a gap and we don't seem to be able to close it, we will look externally. And what do we focus on? It has to be a set of capabilities that is complementary to the organization, not in competition with. It has to also be something that will make us a better firm, a more competitive firm for our clients. And finally, something to pay a lot of attention to. And I think this one gets left behind often, and it causes problems. You have to have cultural alignment with whoever you're teaming up with. And my point of view on that is that if there's cultural misalignment, you will have a problem. The only question is when. And so I would put that top of your list as you're thinking about your practices too. And frankly, it's served us well over the years. Great
answer. Great response. I will say culture came up quite a bit during our investment symposium in May with regard to being a cultural fit. Yes. I don't know that people fully appreciate that. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. The other part of that question is obviously in Atlanta, there are 400 plus RIAs. I'd be curious what your thoughts are around sort of the local impact from consolidation.
Yeah, it's a hard one to answer. I would just say from our selfish point of view, I think the stronger Invesco gets, the better it is for the community, right? And I'd say that's for each one of your practices too. And I was just at Venture Atlanta yesterday, and talking about what's going on in Atlanta, and it's becoming a magnet of growth, right? It has been, but I mean, it's just taking another level on. And so when you start to see, the Microsofts, the Googles, and the like coming here, and the venture community starting to grow at just a very different pace than in the past, it's great for your practices. It's great for Atlanta, and I think we just we got to do whatever we can to help make that happen. And quite frankly, we'll be able to serve our clients and your clients better from that growth.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because that actually transitions to my next thought or next question. I'd be curious about the role that you see for large firms like Invesco in the local community, but also in the global community.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, for us, being a part of the community really matters, right? You can start by saying it's a good thing to do to be participate in the local community, to try to make a difference. The other reality is it's great for our employees, right? When people want to be a part of something more than just go to work every day, they want to make a difference in the community. They want to make a difference in their life. They want to be proud when they talk to their family and friends. And so it might sound like motherhood and apple pie, but it's a reality. And that is something that people make decisions on where do they want to work these days. And those are important. We continue to do that, around the world and different communities in which we participate. And how we might express ourselves is really from a local perspective, because we want to be able to be on the ground and do things that resonate with the communities at large.
Yeah, that's a great point. With everything that we see happening with regard to the labor market and people changing jobs or leaving employers, I think your points are very valid. I'm glad that you were able to share that. And then with regard to industry, the last question before I'll move on to some of the other themes that I mentioned initially is around your thoughts on the profession. As I said, you have obviously an extensive career. You've seen a lot. You've been through a lot. What do you see the profession and maybe the future? What does the future look like with regard to this profession? I'd be curious your thoughts there.
Yeah, needless to say, I'm biased, and probably everybody else on the phone is too. But look, the reality is there's just a fundamental need for investment advice in the country and in the world. And as much as we have all tried to advance financial literacy and help people build financial plans, it's still really hard for individuals. I'm sure we all have friends that we think are pretty sophisticated. They just find it really difficult to, how do I find the right financial advisor? How do I how do I get money management services? And the reality becomes very important. It's, as I say, it's all intellectually clear when you're talking about somebody else, but it's very personal when it's you. And so, I just see, the ongoing need for investment services really being led by, individuals like yourself, making a difference for individuals going forward. The need just goes up, right? And as we've gone through complicated times, and I came in the tail end of the prior conversation, and it's beyond just building, the portfolio, right? It's the totality of the outcomes for individuals and family, whether it be college education, how do I buy a home, how do I source insurance, what is the right level of insurance? Those are really important things, and so it really is there's a need in them that I just don't see going away.
Yeah, that's 100% valid. I think another aspect of it, maybe culturally, money has been sort of that taboo thing you're not supposed to talk about, and we need to change that, right? Like historically, from an education standpoint, I didn't learn about finance, in high school, right? These are things that are not. I had a conversation with a friend, and we said, if I were a physician and people knew that, they would have no problem asking me for medical advice. If I was a lawyer and people knew that, they wouldn't have an issue asking me for legal advice. But working in this industry, people are a little reluctant. There's that issue there that money is not something we comfortably and openly talk about.
I think you're right. And I take your point too. Beginning some financial fundamentals early on in kids' lives and education, it just seems so obvious, and I just don't think we do it very well as a country. And I think a little bit about that. Why is it such an uncomfortable conversation? Differently than if somebody's a lawyer or a doctor, they're recognized as that's a very special field and they know something I don't. I think there's a little bit of a burden that everybody feels like if I don't know money, I'm just I should. And it's just not a reality. I don't care what your job is. We spend every day, all day long on what we do, and we study and we try to become better professionals each and every day. But by the way, we still don't have all the answers, right? It's no different than any other industry.
100% true. So I'm going to shift gears and take us to markets and the economy. Obviously, there's a lot going on. Part of the reason why we're doing this virtually. So I think one of the topics one of the questions I have, and Kristen, hopefully after I go through some of these, we can open it up for Q&A from the audience. But this question is around volatility and speed of the markets. I had attended a session, and I don't remember, it might have been 3 years ago, and it was something about technology in terms of students in college and what they're able to learn, even let's say at Georgia Tech. And it was basically saying that in the past, whereas something that's created, let's say a CD player or something of that nature, the use life of that tech was so much greater, and now things are moving so quickly that what you learn freshman year is basically obsolete by almost sophomore year in terms of education and being in school. So my question for you, is related to volatility, the speed of markets, and how or if that's changed the way Invesco is looking at markets and maybe some of the offerings that you all have.
Yeah, so it's a great question, and is reality that we live in. And let me start by with that. The fundamental principles of what we do don't change and should not change, right? So when we look at our portfolios and how, again, depending on the asset class, the fundamental underlying analysis does not change. And that's how you keep the hallmark of creating success, and the value of being a long-term investor matters a lot. And if it applies to what you're doing, I'd say the exact same thing. We're seeing, as individual investors have gotten, sort of the Reddit investors. That's not a great way to, have a, safe financial future. And so the ideas of understanding what is somebody trying to achieve, what's their time horizon, what's their risk tolerance, what are their return expectations, that does not change at all. And taking people back to first principles is really just an essential element of what we do. But recognizing just what you set up, Wayne, I mean, it's a really different environment. It's so easy to say it's different this time. There are many things that are different, but the fundamental way to create a portfolio that generates the returns that are expected by clients doesn't.
That's perfect. Perfect. Absolutely what I wanted to hear. And then the other topic that obviously is top of mind for most folks is around inflation. Inflation is becoming increasingly a concern for our clients. Would love your thoughts on inflation and its impact on the economy. Obviously, we've heard a lot of talks around whether it's transitory or permanent and things of that nature. Anything you can share there?
Sure. To say it's topical is an understatement, and it's also a reality, right? So we've not had much inflation pressure over the last decade plus, and that's been it's had impacts on the markets. The reality is the Fed president and has been very clear about elements of inflation that are transitory, and I think there are elements that are. I think the other reality is define the term of transitory, because I don't think anybody has. Is it 6 months, 12 months, 24 months? They're going to get different answers. But within it, it looks like inflation has peaked, but coming back to the 2% averages that we've looked at over periods of time, I just don't see that, right? We all live in our communities, and when you look at things like housing, there's huge pressure on housing, right? There's lack of supply of housing. If you look at shelters, it's 32% of the inflation measure, and there's a lot of pressure there. You then look at supply chains. Who's redoing their home and trying to get a refrigerator right now, right? And go try to buy a used car at pretty fancy prices. And those are real, and I don't see the supply chain getting well oiled for, 12, 24, 36 months? I don't know, but it for sure doesn't feel like next quarter. And then the other one that we're dealing with is look at the employment situation. It's, there are more job offerings out there than there are people unemployed. And, so there's upward pressure on wages. It's, how to get people back to work in the right roles. So it's a really challenging environment. So I think there is going to, continue to be inflation, beyond what we would think is sort of the target of the Fed. So what do you do as an investor? You start to look at your allocations vis-a-vis that environment and what does well in inflationary periods: real estate, commodities. When was the last time anybody had an allocation to value? Right? I mean, it's there's some real things that you can do right now, and but again, it's a different environment for a lot of people.
So with that different environment, I do have a question that I'd love your thoughts on. So I had the opportunity to attend a conference a couple of weeks ago in Nashville. It was my first time being sort of in person with others in a conference setting.
Yeah.
And I told my wife I didn't wear my mask as much as I should have. I apologize. I did shake hands. I probably shouldn't have done that. And I was pretty close to almost hugging some people because I was that excited to be around folks again.
That's right.
So, I mean, I'd love your thoughts on, and I know this is a difficult question, so if you can't answer it, that's not a problem. But in terms of sort of how do we get back to normal, if normal is even real anymore? I don't know how we get back there, but I will say sort of I dipped my toe. It felt really, really good. I'm curious your thoughts on maybe even Invesco's return to office plans and things of that nature.
Yeah, look, it's a great question. And, first, again, let's become sort of a political topic, which shouldn't be. The fundamental idea is people need to take care of their health. And, the vaccines do make a difference. Now, everybody can have their own choice, but that's just a fact. And, but it's been a tough one for everybody. What I think about work going forward, the idea of 9 to 5 every day in the office is, I don't think we're going back there. What do I think, though? What got us through the pandemic in a strong way, we had a culture as an organization. We knew one another. We valued one another. We valued our clients. And that's how we rallied to really make a difference during that period. That happened because we were together. So what we're doing as a firm is there's going to be 3 different elements. The vast majority of the people will be some version of hybrid in the office. Some will be in all the time. And then depending on the role, it'll define, when you're in the office, and there'll be a small percentage, maybe 10% of people that will largely work from home. But within it, what we did was we literally went around the world and had to also do adjacency studies, right? If you come in the office and somebody's not there that you need to work with, why are you in the office, right? So you have to create an environment that is meaningful, that is exciting, and making a difference. And what we've said internally too is, look, we're doing a bunch of work. We think we're doing it right, but guess what? Give us a break. We'll adjust when we don't. But I feel we're on the cusp of breaking through on that. And it depends on where we are in the world. When we go out to Asia, China in particular, Hong Kong, we're probably 85% back in the office. So it depends on the health situation around the world. And you're seeing, as people are getting back, they're really enjoying it. And a little bit to your point, like you're about to hug somebody, like, wait, am I supposed to hug anybody? Yeah. And all of a sudden, do I shake hands anymore? I don't know anymore. But those are all signs that we are all people and we all enjoy one another.
Yeah, one of the themes that we've had for the FPA of Georgia this year was we are better together.
Yes.
And being connected is important. So I'm glad that you mentioned that. I'm going to shift gears to the last section that I had in mind, and it's around the area or theme of diversity. One of the questions I have for you is, well, first, women's representation is increasing in the financial services industry. Why is it important to see increased diversity amongst wealth managers, number one? And then the second part to that question is, what do women bring to the table in the wealth management equation? Love your thoughts there.
Yeah, a great point. And if you don't mind, I'm going to back up for a second and then come right into that. So when we did our purpose work, I don't know, 6 years ago or something, what were the fundamental underpinnings of the culture? One of them was we value diversity of thought. And it wasn't me sitting in Atlanta making it up. It literally came through surveys and all these different work groups that we did. And you wouldn't be surprised just because we're around the world. And so our makeup is very diverse just because of being the global firm and all that comes with it. But when we looked at what was a commonality of where were we not diverse enough, it was women in leadership positions. And we had about 25% of our senior leaders were women. And very consistent with the financial services industry, might have been a little ahead at the time. What we did is we publicly went out and said, in the first time, in 3 years, we want 32 to 34% of that group to be represented by women. We surpassed that. We've upped it again to 40%. And what's my point? When leadership owns the change, you start to make a difference. And we started with women, but frankly, all the practices are good for diversity, period. All of it, bringing people in, talk about the people that you have at your organization. When you talk about inclusion, start with the people that are in your firm right now, give them a rise, and it really makes a huge difference. And you get better outcomes for your clients. You'll be better off yourself just by learning from different points of views. So it's just imperative to success. So when you talk about within financial services, and let's talk about financial planning in particular, what a spectacular industry and a way to have, you make a difference in people's lives. You have greater flexibility in what you can do. And let's compare that to sort of investment banking. And so when you have a family and all these different types of things, it's just a great career opportunity for people. And I think the other reality is, if you think of the client base right now, and you mentioned gender, and Wayne, you'll probably correct me, but the last time I saw about 50% of the wealth in the country is controlled by women. And if you look at the makeup of the typical financial advisor, it's a white male that's 55 and older, right? So the mismatch is not a good one. So people want to work with people that they can relate to too, and that really makes a difference.
And I would argue, so I spent 6 years as a teacher. I taught high school math when I left Wall Street for teaching and trying to give back in some regard. So one of the challenges I saw as a teacher was if I were to show deference or too much attention to one student, another student felt left out. If I was preferential treatment to the girls, the guys were like, Mr. Ewan, you're not showing the guy, that kind of issue. So I wonder, in this diversity sort of conversation, even though it makes sense, someone sometimes feels left out, like I'm not included in this conversation. How do we get to a point where diversity should be everybody? Like, it's not just everybody but the white male, it's everybody. How do we get there?
So a couple things. So I learned way back when I worked, when we talked about this a few years ago, I started my career working for John Templeton, and it was a tiny firm. I was the 14th employee, and I learned so much from him. One of the things that he would do is he'd go into a meeting. He has some very strong thoughts, but he was an active engager. He literally went around the room and asked each person for their thoughts, right? So it brings out the introvert, whoever it might be. It's the best, that's a very good practice, right? And by the way, if you're the last one to speak, you're not cutting off, good thoughts from other people that might be intimidated to sort of contradict, sort of quote, the boss. So that's one thing. And we had this great debate, and others might disagree with me in what we did as a firm. But when we put out our goals for gender diversity, we had the big debate: what are we trying to get with the goal, right? Is it a requirement? And to a little bit of your point of, it needs to be a meritocracy, right? And so, because you also want the people that they earned the role, right? And so let's not undermine people and everything that they've done. So I think you're really on it. It has to be, driven by meritocracy. You want to put people in a position to be successful. You want to drive self-esteem in a very positive way. And the goal was versus a quota, right? And the worst thing you want to do, if you put a person in a role and it feels like they're not qualified and they fail, it's bad for everybody. Right. So it's a really complicated way, but that's how we've thought about it. And I'm not going to say we're perfect, and I'm not going to say that people in our organization don't feel left out in this whole conversation. But we just need to move forward, and we're better off as with diversity of thought in everything that we do.
Right. I think your point is well taken, because it's the fact that you and your team leaders are thinking about it, trying to work on various ways to address it. Whether it's perfect, there's no panacea. Whether it's perfect or not is regardless. Something is being done to try to address this and sort of bring it into the overall business. The other part of that question that I have is, how do you think we can encourage more women to pursue the field? I go back to my teaching days again, right? As I said, I taught high school math for a number of years, and the challenge is, some women are even telling themselves, I'm not good at this.
Yeah.
How do we, and maybe it starts earlier than that, I'm not even sure. What can we do to encourage more women to pursue the field, and what changes do we need to see taking place in the industry?
Yeah. So look, it is, it's similar to investment management. So when you think of the universities and the like, collectively, we don't do a lot of hiring at the universities as compared to, let's say, the investment banks or whatever it might be. I mean, they're machines in the hiring that they do. So we sort of put in this overall block of financial services as opposed to investment management or financial planning, and they are different, right? And you have, we're fiduciaries. We put the client first. All these different types of things, different lifestyles, et cetera. So early on, educating, and by the way, what we learned, if you're trying to target somebody junior, senior in high school, it's way too late. Or college, they've already, they're going to go get the CPA, they're going to go to one of the big four, whatever it might be. It's really probably get in the community in high school, and start saying, go to the, what does your dad or mom do for work days and all those different types of things. But it needs to be early on. And I know that will sound like it's forever and a day, and it is, but we need to work all angles. And the other thing, Wayne, is interesting with your career, and we need the teachers to teach. Yeah, that's a hugely important thing. But by the way, teachers have done a phenomenal job coming into financial planning just because of the fundamental skills that they have and how they interact with people. And quite frankly, there's an element of empathy, I believe. And those are all very important things when you're dealing with individuals' financial well-being.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you. Very, very, very helpful. Kristen, I'm going to open it up for Q&A for the remaining time. Are there any questions that we have in the queue that we can add?
Yeah, Brandon had a question. What industry trend or trends have demanded your attention, Marty?
Oh gosh, there's so many. Let's see. I will say an area that is pervasive around the world is ESG, and depending on where you sit in the world right now, ESG on the continent in Europe, UK, it is, if you are not deeply embracing ESG, you're commercially going to be, not a viable institution. It's coming to the United States and, quite a way. There's quite a bit of, it's moving at a very rapid pace, and where it is today, where it was 2 years ago, is very different. And China has frankly focused on climate, which is a very good one, but it is a world development. It's a very complicated area. We've seen people sort of greenwashing their portfolios, which is not a great thing. There'll be greater regulation around it, which I think is actually a very good thing. But again, the level of misunderstanding of what ESG is and what it isn't is all over the place. Standards are just emerging right now. So it's going to be an evolution over the next few years. But I will say my general feeling in the next, pick your time period, 3 to 5 years, we won't talk about ESG as a separate thing. It'll be a part of all of our practices. So that's probably one of the trends that is quite pervasive globally that we're seeing.
Okay. And kind of in the same vein, I actually had a specific question because, I followed QQQ, as I'm sure a lot of people do. But, just looking at the returns, and it just seems, with the 12-month trailing 3 and 5, we're just in this progressive, increase, right? At some point, every sector is dependent on technology. So isn't it all, and this is just me, and this, just a little bit of a kind of feigned ignorance of, isn't it all just QQQ at some point? How do you view sectors, and how do you view what is QQQ in the future? Go ahead, sorry.
No, Chris, it's a great question. And so recognizing where the sponsor QQQs has been a phenomenal run, and for all the underlying elements that you're talking about, but you really have to have a diverse portfolio, right? As phenomenal as QQQs have been, it is a sector that's been on. What do you then start to look at over time? What are the relative valuations? What's the concentration within a cap-weighted portfolio? Those, sort of know what you own, and there are elements. And this is, so I've been saying this for a decade, and I've been wrong because of the run around, because of really the monetary environment, and where Wayne mentioned the interest rates, but you really have to look at other sectors too, right? So if you look at financial services, we're selling at multi-decade lows. So there are other sectors where, to balance your portfolio is probably a wise thing over time. But, no question the QQQs the companies of them have done very, very well.
And kind of just keeping on that vein of technology, do you see QQQ or, any other maybe additional, I don't know, I don't want to say concentration, but investment in, I'm gonna say it, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency? What are your views on that? I'm doing it, Wayne. All right.
Good. I'm glad you did. So there is no question the underlying technology of blockchain is a disruptive technology that will impact probably every industry and most everything that we do, and it's a great thing to get exposure to. Around Bitcoin and the relative currencies, that's not going away either. The issue is, what is it really? So what do I see as the risks within it? That it still at this moment is something where there's money laundering, drug trade, all these different things, working through Bitcoin. That's the regulators are going to look at that. If Bitcoin ever becomes sort of a threat to monetary policy, regulation is a risk. So I've heard some people, which is sort of interesting, if it sort of gets repositioned as an alternative to gold, that makes more sense to me. I will say also, I've never understood gold as an investment, but many people do. So it is a space to pay attention to. We have a ETF and registration. We'll see when it, with a partnership with Galaxy to see, if we can get direct access to Bitcoin, through the ETFs. But again, it's in registration, so it'll be some time. But we did introduce a couple ETFs that get exposure to this, the broader space just last month. So it's an area to definitely pay attention to.
Excellent. And just kind of on that note too, with the BITO and the recent ETF futures for Bitcoin, you just said it's probably going to be some time before yours, comes through. Do you know, I mean, in your opinion, why is that? Like, why does it seem, like Gensler's more apt to introduce a futures product versus the actual ETF?
Yeah, I think because it's really from, if you want to call it more, I'll get sort of basic sort of the custodian element of the whole thing is really, how do you get security around, the custodian of the Bitcoin itself is, a principal one. And, previously he is at CFTC and, so he was a primary regulator around the futures markets. And so he has some level of comfort with the futures market vis-a-vis, the issues that are being worked through in the physical Bitcoin itself.
Okay, that makes sense. Thank you for that insight. I appreciate it. And I just wanted to echo Luis's comment in the chat. We were very relieved and to hear you say that you didn't get why gold was, the investment hedge. I always thought the same thing. I think a lot of our planners, it's kind of something you just learn from day one, especially in CFP. It's just, that's what you think of with gold. But I'm glad to hear your comments on that.
Well, I'm glad we agree. There are others that have very different views on it, but I've just never gotten it. So, but maybe someday I will.
So, Kristen, I do have one other question. If there are no questions from the audience.
Yeah, I didn't see anything. Well, more of a comment. We would love to see you at our event on December 8th, Marty, if you can attend. If you can pop on over to Ponce City Market Roof, we'll be over there at from 5 to 8. We'd love to have you.
Well, look, it's you guys do a great job and do really important things. And it's fun to spend time with you. And if I can get there, I will. And by the way, what a great venue too. I think it's one of the best in town, quite frankly. So
excellent.
It's a great time.
And Todd's invited too.
Good.
All right, thanks.
my last question then, Marty, is obviously in the news, the Wall Street Journal had reported about State Street and Invesco talks with regard to merger. Obviously, I know what's not public you can't necessarily delve into, but I'm curious your thoughts on the topic of scale, right? Everybody talks about scale. Scale's become critical. And I do recall in the 90s, Goldman had reported on the behemoth and the boutique, right? Yeah. Scale has become critical. I'd be curious your thoughts on how different is it now from the 90s, or do you see any parallels there?
Yeah, so I remember that research too. And Wayne, what they think you had to be 200 billion, I think was the number. Yeah. Some number there, it might have been 50 billion, whatever. It's like, you gotta be kidding. It's dwarfed by where the industry's gone. But so look, my philosophy, as long as, and I learned probably from John Devlin originally, is what you should do is understand what your client needs, do a good job for your clients. If you do a good job, you'll grow. And that is, the relative scale will come. I believe that for a very long time. I'd say post-financial crisis, and I'd probably say about 5 years ago, what really started to happen is there are so many demands on money managers that scale mattered, right? And I really, it was sort of against my core belief, but the reality, it reflects, a maturing industry. And the fact is, there are too many money managers right now, and all of you are clients. As I said earlier, you're demanding more from us, and you want a broader array of capabilities. That costs money, and then just the cost of regulation. Kristen brought up the point of technology. The demands on technology investments are material. So you literally, beyond scale in your capabilities, you have to have scale, operational scale to reinvest in the business to meet these demands that are coming from the evolution of the industry, technology, and regulation. So I think you're going to continue to see consolidation. As you say, this is not a new idea. But it seems, a little different this time. It's probably, but I don't think of it as rampant, right? It's just hard to do, but you'll see more than not. And what's going to happen is, those money managers that aren't serving their clients well, they'll just shrink because clients will go somewhere else. So you'll continue to see, I'd say, sort of the spectrum of the boutiques will continue to do quite well, and the large, strongly resourced organizations will also do well. So
Perfect. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time. Appreciate your candidness, and your answers has been very, very informative. Cannot thank you enough, obviously, for spending some time with us on a Friday morning, no less. Kristen, I'll turn it over to you to close us out.
Yeah. All right. Well, excellent. I have to echo Wayne. It's been an honor, privilege to listen to you and hear your thoughts and opinions about things that are really important for us as advisors, planners, and of course, things that are important for our clients. We matriculate that information down. It's been really, really a great time this morning. So thank you, Marty, for joining us. Thank you, Todd. He is our partner contact for Invesco. Again, just like I mentioned at the beginning of our call, everyone, partners like Invesco help us to stay running, especially in a year where we were limited in what we could do. So again, thank you all members for sticking with us and for joining us too. And a special thank you to Wayne Ewing, our president-elect for 2022. Excited to continue to work with him as chair next year. And again, everybody mark your calendars for December 8th, Wednesday at 5 p.m. We'll see you there.
Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, Wayne, very much. And Todd, thanks for helping. Good. Chat soon, everybody. Have a good week.
Right.
Yeah, bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.